You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold, episode 16 today. Today, we have our first international guest, so to speak. Just went all the way from Austria to Italy, I believe you're at now. I'm so pumped to have Johannes Willheim with us. How you doing out there?
Hey, I'm good, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, Johannes, am I saying that correctly? I just want to make sure.
Absolutely right.
Good. So you are a partner at Jones Day, which is an elite global law firm. It's very, very impressive. I watched some of your YouTube videos, your speeches. You do a lot of speeches, and very good. Like I was impressed. I'm really into like the ADR, the mediation, arbitration, negotiation. So that was kind of cool to watch. So Jones Day is it's in North America, Europe, Latin America, Middle East, and Asia Pacific, correct?
Absolutely correct.
So what offices are you at? Where do you travel around to?
So, let me begin by saying I'm a partner in the global disputes practice of Jones Day.
Right.
And the practice name is really what it is. We work globally. So I'm based administratively in the Frankfurt office, but I work out of Paris, London, and my cases really are all over the world. So I have cases in Singapore down to, let's say, Russia, the Ukraine, all over the world.
That's amazing. You know, one thing that came to mind, I don't want to go too deep into this because we're gonna come back to it later, but one thing that immediately came to mind about like global disputes, how are those enforced? Like how are those, like how do you is it fines or like the damages, or like how do you make sure that like if something's like settled in one country, like how does that work?
Well, so again, let's start with what kind of work we're doing. So what we do is, in this specific field, we really help our clients in really international disputes, meaning cross-border disputes. Think of a company investing, for example, in an oil drilling platform in another jurisdiction. Or think of a joint venture between a North American and a Chinese company. Or think of a North American company selling its patents or technology to Europe.
Wow.
But there is a dispute arising. If you usually have a dispute, you would go to the courts, and there's international private law, and you would go to the courts, which are competent on the basis of international law, and you would resolve your dispute before the courts. Now, people in big, large cross-border projects don't trust national courts for several reasons. First of all, they may not be neutral. So if you invest in Timbuktu, you may not trust Timbuktu courts if you're expropriated, right? You would want to seek a neutral forum. So what people always prefer to do in international context is they go to arbitration. And arbitration is the same as a court. It's just organized privately. And that's your question, once a judgment is rendered, it's called in arbitration an award. Okay. It is enforceable in the States as a judgment. And that's what I mostly do in my work, is I do international arbitration.
Okay. Wow. That sounds like stuff I hear about in movies, you know, like, I mean, these big firms do some really, really interesting things. I mean, that's terrific. I mean, that's great that you're able to work in all these different offices and settle disputes globally between huge companies.
And Ben, I tell you, when I became a lawyer, my dad was a lawyer.
Okay.
I would have never thought of that what I do even exists and is possible.
Right.
I was thinking of a traditional lawyer going to the court around the corner for a traffic accident or a malpractice case or a civil dispute or a family dispute. I never even thought of what is out there in the world and how you can practice law. And it really rewarded me in my personal life so beautifully. I had the blessing to see so many cultures and things,
Yeah,
and
it's
that's where asset is, right? We are not only lawyers, but we understand cultural differences, we understand systematic differences, and that's how we navigate these disputes. And it's fascinating.
wow. So okay, with that, so like let's bring it back to like
By the
growing.
way, I'm sorry, you mentioned that I'm in Italy, so you can see I'm in a hotel. So the
Yeah,
people,
you're in Italy. That's
it's
amazing.
hotel guests.
We all want a live look in Italy anytime we can get it. So that's really cool. It's awesome. So let's bring it back to like growing up. So you're from Vienna, Austria, correct? So
That's
like
correct.
what was it? Okay, so two-part question. What was it like to grow up there? And then like when did you said your dad was a lawyer, but like when was the moment that you decided like this is for you?
This is the lawyer in you. This is a two-part question.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say it depends, but
So the first part question is, yes, I was born in Vienna, Austria.
okay.
And I never wanted to be a lawyer. I saw my dad. He was a lawyer, like a traditional lawyer, how it was back then in the days. He basically was a solo practitioner with one or two secretaries, maybe one associate.
Okay.
And all I saw was my dad working day and night, files, files, files. And I knew one thing: I never want to be a lawyer.
What was he do? Was he general practice? Is that what he was
He
doing?
was a total general practitioner, but he had one specialty. He was specialized in media and entertainment law.
Okay.
One of his most fascinating clients, who actually had a very big influence on me, was a very famous American conductor, Leonard Bernstein.
Okay.
So Leonard Bernstein, conductor and composer um, in a classical music field. I saw him when I was a child all the time together with my dad. And not only was he a great conductor, but he was one of the greatest teachers I've ever seen. He taught generations of young musicians and he motivated them. And he had a very unconventional style of teaching. And I saw him so many times, and that influenced me so big time that this is a big part of my life today, that I teach young lawyers or
Yeah.
young
It's great.
professionals. And that were the seeds, which I saw back then.
Wow.
Never wanted to be a lawyer.
Well, but there had to be a time where you're like, that's that I'm.
No, actually, truth of the matter is, Ben, uh, I would have chosen anything, becoming a windsurfing instructor with aspirations to become a movie star, a rock star. Problem was, I was not good at acting. I had no talent in music. I liked the lifestyle, but I never had the skills. So one day, actually very dramatic day, is that my father became very sick from one day to the other. So he had something similar to a heart attack. He was dead within seconds, but resuscitated after 15 minutes, and,
Wow.
and basically was a coma patient for 27 years. So with that happening to my dad, I realized that my dreams and aspirations of becoming some more than a lawyer were gone, and I had to do something very serious. And so what I did is I went to law school.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough, although law school in Europe is very different compared to the US.
That was one of my questions, actually. Yeah.
You don't play, you don't pay. You have thousands of students. You're totally on your own. It's not a guided program.
Did you say you don't pay? Is that what
You don't pay, zero.
I should have went out there. All right.
Well, the state pays for it, but you're one of 1,000, and you have to fight your way through to actually get a job and career. Very different from the US. You fight yourself into good law school, into funding, but with that, you have an almost certain ticket to get a job. Very different in Europe. You have access to schooling, but that doesn't guarantee you a job. But the downside of these big universities in Europe is that you hardly have contact with your teachers. you're on your own. And that was very different for me. So I had the blessing from the very first second on, I met fantastic teachers who, on the long run, during my university time, became mentors.
Okay.
And so I realized one thing: I wasn't good at singing, I wasn't good at playing an instrument, I wasn't that great of an athlete, but I had a talent for law. And just finally became to feel comfortable that this is my path. And I think the most important part of my path is that I practice my job with a great passion without, necessarily having to live to the traditional standards of being a lawyer. And I think that's something we may talk along in this podcast,
Yep.
is that today you can practice law in so many different ways, again, in ways which I would have never anticipated. And so here you go. I almost have my rock star life practicing international arbitration,
Yeah.
in which I'm good at, and seeing and experiencing the most fantastic things, and actually contributing to the big changes in the world, and actually being part of making it happen, right? Taking care of whenever there's a crunch, whenever there's a dispute, to find a solution and to make it possible that companies invest globally and work globally. And so we contribute, and I found my own path.
That's amazing. So how did you get into the firm Jones Day? Like, how did you come to be at such a big scale place?
Well, I think I would have never thought that this would happen. Austria is a country with 7 to 8 million people.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is it's economically completely irrelevant. That's why in Austria itself, you only find one American big law firm, which is Baker McKenzie. There's no other big international firms because it is too small of a country. Well, there's one British firm, Freshfields, but all the other internationals, they wouldn't even go to Austria because the market is too small. And what also happened is that reversely, you find international students taking an LLM at an American university and actually having the opportunity to work for 1 year in a US law firm, because these firms know these people work in big markets, in particular like South America,
right,
Asian markets, where they sort of create loyalties by having these people work for them for 1 year, then sending them back to their markets and having them as a referral source or somebody they can refer work to. I never had the blessing as an Austrian because the market is too small. So Americans couldn't even care about an Austrian. So it was a long, long path. And actually, I always had the dream to work at an American law firm. And when I was going to law school, I called at these law firms from Vienna, Austria, and I asked for the HR department. I said, what do I need to do to work here? And I got some, stereotypical answers. Well, you need to have an American degree, you need to have a JD or whatever. But it almost seemed like an impossible path. And I think what I'm doing today is something not so many do right now, but it's becoming more and more possible because the world is changing so much.
Right.
But at the time I did it, you couldn't really plan it. So what was I doing? I was making sure that I learned English. I exposed myself to, taking different programs after law school, which are more international.
Okay.
Fields where you can actually practice law internationally. And there's not so many fields, right? There's a few. International arbitration definitely is one of the fields where you can practice internationally. So I was focusing on that. And then I took every opportunity to work outside of the traditional path. I applied for outside firms. My first firm I worked internationally was a big international firm called Clifford Chance. I worked in their Brussels office, which is not only the capital of the European Union, but it's the capital in Europe for antitrust law.
Wow.
Specializing on antitrust law, working in Brussels for a UK-based law firm, which was one of the big first international firms. I went back to Austria, but I took every opportunity to work internationally. And I actually got to Jones Day through the back door because I
Okay.
was lucky that I had a very big energy client and I was doing all their international arbitration cases throughout Europe. But they were so big, and at that time I had my own law firm, that they said, Johannes, we want you as our trusted key lawyer on these arbitration cases, but you actually need to partner up with a big law firm because we need the infrastructure, we need the
That's
name,
interesting. Yeah. Okay.
liability.
Yep.
So I was looking at two firms, and one of them was Jones Day. And at Jones Day, I had a former teacher of mine in international arbitration. So I retained him as co-counsel. And this is where actually the journey began, because that's how I got to know the firm. That's how the firm
Yep.
got to know
That's
me.
how you do it. Just like that. Yep.
And then I transited. And my life completely changed once I was with Jones Day, because we are this global institution.
Yep.
And that's the kind of work we do. And all of a sudden, I walk into our New York office and everybody says, hi, Johannes. I walk into a London
Yeah.
office.
Yep.
This is hi, Johannes.
Well, let me tell you. Let me stop you there, because when we decided to do the podcast, when we agreed on a date, I got a message on Instagram immediately from somebody, very nice woman who does legal marketing. She'll probably be watching this, and she said, "Oh, you're having Johannes on your podcast. He's the next big thing. I mean, I think you are the big thing, but you're the upcoming. So you definitely have an impression on people. So congratulations on like where you've taken your career thus far. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
When nobody
It's passion.
you have that mindset that nobody's going to hold you back. I mean, whether you're partnering up, like you said, with a bigger firm because you have your own firm, but you have a big case and you need the infrastructure, like you said, of a big firm, or you're pushing the snack cart in the firm as a lawyer who didn't have the grades. I mean,
But see, Ben, this is why I am on your podcast.
opportunities are unlimited. When you realize that nobody can tell you what you can or cannot do.
But this is why I love being on your podcast, because you attract like the new generation of lawyers. And what I want to convey to them is sometimes in these days when I look at Instagram and stuff like that, I think how boring must it feel? And that's why I told you the story of what I wanted to become and what I actually became. Is because when you look at all of this, the world seems to evolve around Instagram stars and athletes and actors and whatever.
Yeah.
And it seems almost super dull to choose a profession like becoming a lawyer. And truth of the matter is, these days, you can do so much in the practice of law.
Okay.
And you can have such a rewarding career and actually also personal life. This is why I love being on your podcast, because I want to inspire your entire community that
Right.
you're not stuck in an old traditional boring profession, but we are actually at the crossroad of modernizing this profession completely, and it's getting more and more exciting, and you contribute so much and you can have a great life. You don't
Yep.
need to be a super athlete. You can be a super lawyer.
Right.
Don't even need to be a super lawyer. You can be a normal lawyer doing very important work and helping people and be contributing to community, and that's super rewarding, and that's the message I really want to convey.
Well, that was interesting. Like when we discussed being on the podcast, one thing you said to me, and I think that's what makes you unique. One of the things, of course, that makes you unique as a big law lawyer is you said, and I quote, "I have made it my mission to inspire the next generation of legal professionals." And you just said that. I have it in my show notes here, and that's awesome. I mean, I think I think it's really hard. Like, I mean, the reason why I started lawyers, I mean, I can go into it for hours. I love talking about lawyer stories, but one of the reasons is because I felt like I personally didn't have a mentor to like learn, and it took me a long time to find a job. I wasn't a big law, I didn't have really the credentials out of law school to even apply, nor did I feel like I was wired for, maybe 16-hour days, right? So everybody has a story, and I think as attorneys, I'm licensed in 3 states in the U.S., and I think as attorneys, I think we're all sort of sociologists. I know I'm a sociologist at heart, different than any other profession. Like we've all, a lot of the attorneys and people who go to law school, you know, do it because of something that happened in their life, or that, you know, they have a story, they have a general interest in society. So I love that, you know, you do have an interest in inspiring the next generation of legal professionals. So, you know, I want to go through a couple of the questions that we talked about.
Okay.
But did you want to respond to that first before I ask you?
Well, the only thing I wanted to respond is to two comments you made, or maybe one that you said, you know, I didn't, you mean you didn't feel like you were the big law guy. And you know what? That's how I felt too. And all I want to share with you is, and that's also why I told you the story about mass universities in Europe, where people say, oh, you get lost in the masses and you're not seen. Here's one thing I want to share with you and your community. Also change your paradigm of how you think of certain employers or institutions. Because what is interesting and what was my experience, and that maybe was because I was so vulnerable at that time because of the story with my dad, that I was looking to my professors and teachers at the university, and I was actually making a move towards them. And you know what happened? They moved towards me. And the mass university all of a sudden was no longer a mass university.
Right.
But I found my own mentors. And the only thing I did was that I didn't accept the paradigm that they are unapproachable. And once you approach these people, surprisingly enough, they come towards you because they appreciate you as actually reaching out.
Okay.
And it's the same thing with, like, Jones Day maybe is one of the oldest, and let's put it this way, maybe most conservative law firms.
Okay.
And truth of the matter is, I find the biggest support in this firm for what I do, who I am, and how I practice the law, because they appreciate the input. And what I'm sort of trying to convey is that you can contribute to these institutions and you can find your own way in these institutions. And one should never be afraid of trying to change certain conventions in a way. And it's always a two-side street, and it's been wonderful and rewarding in every sense.
That's great. Yeah. And I could feel like your happiness, like emanating out of
Thank you.
No, really, like I think you're really centered, and you know, you really believe in like what you're saying, and like you want to pass that happiness on, or that, you know, maybe happiness is too simple of a word, but that sort of knowledge on to somebody who may be struggling or who doesn't know, like,
Exactly.
go in the legal career. And like that,
and I've been struggling all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I mean, I could tell you stories offline sometime. But like, so as for an international career, like, is it like, are international careers possible in law still? Like the ones that you're?
Yeah, more than ever. So because the world is, despite COVID and all of the things we're going through right now in this exceptional, situation, circumstances, the world has become a global market, and it will always be codependent and stay in this way. But that offers great opportunities for lawyers. You're no longer stuck. You can move like me, and you can work in different places. And I think if you look at it, there's a couple ways you can look at. You can look at it by practice areas. So there's a few areas which are really destined to be practiced internationally. It's international arbitration. You can do it in transactional work, in particular tax law and M&A. You can do it in financial markets, and also in antitrust. So if you say, I'm somebody who wants to work internationally, you can look at certain fields of the law and make this decision and work this way. The second way to do it is also not only look at private practice, but look at in-house positions. There's many global firms out there, in which the legal departments totally work internationally. One of my best friends, somebody you should really have on your podcast,
Sure.
Is a guy called Bjarne Tellman. He writes books on building inspirational legal teams. He's been a private practice lawyer, but he has now worked for we're getting old, a couple decades, maybe not couple, but 2 decades at least, worked in-house. He was the general counsel for Coca-Cola Asia Pacific. He's worked now as general counsel for Pearson and moved on. And he really works all over the globe. So by looking at certain fields of law and certain employers, you almost have an international career in law guaranteed. And in private practice, the best way to do it is to work with an international firm like Jones Day or the other ones who really work. Right. That's the way to set yourself up. How to get there? Pretty hard.
It's hard. It's hard though. I mean, that's great advice, but I think it is difficult. I mean, I remember being in law school and people sending hundreds of letters to the big law firms, like when they were second year trying to get that, maybe first year. I mean, I wouldn't know, I didn't do it, but first year, like trying to get that second year clerkship, so then they could get hired on. So they would send like hundreds of letters to the big firms, and those were only things that I'd heard about. So,
but Ben, what you're looking at right now is already, you describe the way how you find a job in the US traditionally.
Right, traditional, right.
The first thing you have to do is look at how can I do it differently. And so I have many American students who have found me or who have seen other people like me. And they're like, maybe I'm not sending my CV to Sullivan and Cromwell in New York and all the other 1,000 CVs, but maybe I send it to a firm abroad.
Yeah.
And a firm abroad where I can understand that on the long run, I can circle back to my home jurisdiction. But the key to, making it differently is to actually take the risk to do it differently and to sort of rely on that on the long run, it goes full circle the way you want to go.
Right.
I never took conventional career decisions.
That was it. That's it. And that's like some of the best advice that I got, from my dad, actually. Like sometimes you have to do things like the untraditional way to get where you want to be, because it's not going to work traditionally for everybody. So you have to do things untraditional and you could still end up in the same place, like doing what you want to do. So I think that's sort of relevant. That's good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, again, it's easier said for me because I'm fully aware of the fact that if you go to law school in the US and you start your professional career with big debts, it's very different because the first thing you want to do is you want to repay your debts. I completely understand that.
Yeah, that's hard.
There are now even big international firms which actually are based or originated or headquartered in the US. So the people recruiting understand the needs of young Americans. But still, if you ask and say, look, I would love to do an international arbitration career, and I understand that the arbitral centers are not only New York, but are in Singapore or in Paris or in London, is there any chance to get me to London? They will do it. One important thing to know is these firms are no travel agencies, right? So there's something you have to offer to them. And one of the best things, again, you can show people is your commitment to a certain practice area. By having read about the stuff, by knowing what the people in the firm do in the Paris office, by having attended seminars where these people are to understand more. So it's not just enough to say, I want to go to London, but you have to, do your own research and you have to do your own contributions to actually increase your chances that they will offer you something outside of the States, for example.
So like, what's your big fascination with doing with like your career in international law? Like, do you like to travel and be in different places? Like, is that?
No, I think so there's a few things. So first of all, I love learning the problems of today's world through the work I do. Because I see sort of what's happening behind the scenes. So I see, not only how people do these international deals, but I also understand where the friction is. And the other thing I really love about it is to learn so much about that our law is only one little piece of the puzzle in resolving a dispute, or in making something happen.
So I mean, have you seen like big I mean, obviously the laws are different in each country, but have you seen like really big distinctions like in law, like where one country would do it one way and then the other country is just totally off the charts the way, or are they more nuanced? Is it more nuanced sort of?
Well, so let's say on the substantive law,
Okay.
like the rules governing a deal or regulation, that is converging more and more to sort of a unified system or standard. And you almost have a gut feeling of, what the right answer would be or what the solution to a problem would be. There is an entire difference in how you actually practice law. You cannot even compare a European trial lawyer with a US trial lawyer.
Really?
You cannot even compare the skills, the training. European lawyers have no training in whatsoever in examining witnesses or anything.
So like, it's probably, so if you're talking trial, is it like, and I don't like to get too much into the weeds, but if you're talking trial, like, are you talking like the evidence, like their knowledge?
Evidence. So in Europe, there's no rules of evidence, for example.
Okay.
There's a lot less oral pleadings. There's more written pleadings.
Right.
The role of the judge is a totally different one. The role of experts is totally different.
Really, with the role of the judge, how is that? It's so interesting. Like, how is that?
So in the US, in simple terms, a judge takes much more a passive role, sort of almost just being a referee, making sure that the attorneys, who are the masters of the trial, adhere to the rules. Whereas in Europe, the judge takes a much more ex officio, so like authoritative role on steering the process, and they're more inquisitory in finding the truth in terms of the facts and the law.
Yeah.
And the role of the lawyers is much more limited. So that comes with ultimately US lawyers have very different skill sets compared to European lawyers. And that's the beauty about practicing international arbitration.
That's interesting. Yeah.
That's a melting pot of all the systems. Yeah. What you do in international arbitration is you take the best of all systems. And so there's a lot of oral pleading, there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of advocacy in terms of, examining witnesses, examining experts. And that's really the fascinating thing for me, is that I learn every day from the best of the world, from different cultures and backgrounds. And I can create my own mixture over the years of who I am as a lawyer.
That's, oh, wow. That's super interesting. So you could basically, so what you're saying is you can, by looking and like sort of surveying and studying like all these different lawyers from different countries, you're going to
100%
pieces that you think can make you like
100%.
Okay, that's cool.
And you said before you like sort of the ADR and mediations. Yeah. So think of, our job is not being good in a specific process. Our job is to accomplish a client's aim, to bring something to a solution. And what you learn in all of this mixture is, how do I get there? And what you also see if you practice internationally, that how you get to a solution in one country may never get you to a solution in another country. I told you about my friend Bjarne. When he became the general counsel of Coca-Cola Asia Pacific, they moved him to Japan.
Yep.
Got emails from him all the time where he said, I don't know, I don't get it. I've trained at the best legal institutions. I worked at the best law firms of the world. I thought I know how to solve a problem. Whenever I go to my board in Asia with 3 solutions, I have learned one thing now, is the solution I propose and think is the best is the first one they dismiss.
Wow.
you begin to understand that what you think is a way to crack a nut
Yeah.
only works in your own bubble, but it works totally different somewhere else. And that is what is, and that was your question. That's what fascinates me the most.
Are you
Is
writing books? Are you writing books?
all the time. Huh?
Are you writing books on this, Johannes?
I don't have the time. I'm
Yeah.
working
All right.
day and night. I'm happy if I can speak and teach.
Yeah.
One, I will write books.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So I didn't mean to cut you off there. That's super.
No.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So like we talk about the positives. Are there any downsides of the international law practice?
Well, so yeah, I mean, there's many downsides. There's like the biggest personal downside. Look at it this way. If you go every day to your court building around the corner, you know to play the game.
Right.
My downside is I have to reinvent
Right.
myself and my recipes
Yep.
every day, and I'm always out of the comfort zone. That is nerve-wracking, right?
Study the judge a little bit, because you're not used to being in I mean, these practitioners, I used to go to housing court a lot in New Haven. Not that I'd ever go in front of the judge, maybe here and there. You'd go in front of the judge. It was totally different. I can't even compare it to that. But I think people who were doing trials like knew the judges. But if you're in different venues,
doesn't feel good, right?
right.
It's hard, and that's sort of the downside is you always feel on a weak spot at the first time.
Yeah.
But that's also the cool thing. It's that outside of the comfort zone is actually where you grow, but it's hard. The other thing that is definitely hard is to keep up a normal social life or to keep up your own routine, such as I go exercising at 7 a.m. in the morning. Well, if you travel time zones all the time, your 7 a.m. becomes a very blurry concept.
How often are you traveling right now? Like how often? Like
in peak times, I sometimes travel 3-4 times a week.
Wow.
Sometimes I travel so much that when I stay at a hotel, like where I'm staying right now, that I take these little, notepads where there's the hotel name and the address. I put it next to my nightstand so that when I get up in the morning, I look at, I'm in Trieste, Italy right now.
I'm in Italy. How was the travel and everything with the COVID and just now coming in? Like,
My life totally changed. My body was so confused for the first 6 weeks. It was like, what? Having a routine with me?
Right. Because you weren't traveling for a while, right? Okay. So
I haven't been traveling.
Where were you before this?
So I went back to Vienna, Austria, because that's where my kids live. So in all this crisis, I wanted to be close to my kids.
Yep.
That in case something happens, I'm right there.
Right.
I was working from home like everybody.
Is that your main office, Vienna? Like, do you have like a main Jones Day office?
Well, so my Jones Day home base is in Frankfurt right now.
Frankfurt, right. Okay. Wow.
We don't have an office in Vienna.
Okay. So you have a big case in Italy? Is that what you're doing?
No, I'm on a 3 days holiday. I'm a passionate sailor.
And look at you kicking off your holiday with a Lawyer Stories podcast.
This is what it is.
Wicked cool.
Today, driving with the car.
Yep.
This is what we do.
Wicked cool. So, like, I want to ask you a question before unless there was something you wanted to add to that about the.
Nope.
Okay, so like big law firm, a lot of responsibility. Like, I want, like I mentioned, and I think everybody should go look you up on YouTube and watch your YouTube videos. There's a few out there.
Thank you.
They're awesome. I mean, I know like Jones Day probably did the production of those, or maybe you have somebody who did it. Did you do it? Or
I do it. Well, I did it with a friend of mine.
Okay. Well, they did a great job.
Yeah. Thank you.
So you're so like people love you, man. Like you're so relaxed. You have a great presence. I think like.
Thank you.
I think the youth, and I'm not really the youth anymore, believe it or not. I'm not even a millennial. I know it's hard to believe because I have such a young spirit, but I think people, they need you, like the youth, to teach them about these new ways. But like, what do you do to stay like so centered and like so like sort of calm? Like, do you meditate or do you work out? I'm just curious on like a personal basis. Do you do any of that or no? Is it just
Yeah, I do all of that.
okay? All right.
I do all of that. So, well, first of all, there's a number of things I'm totally passionate, equally as the law.
Okay.
This really keeps me balanced. So one of my biggest passions actually is, that's why I'm here, is sailing.
Okay.
And
Cool.
I learned so much from sailing about life. And that totally centers me in so many ways. First of all, it is like meditation practice, and you can learn so much about it. And I actually do sometimes with students. I go on a boat and I teach them, and you can learn things about, working as a team, different roles of a team, but also simple messages like when you go to the upwards wind buoy in a regatta. Although you would want to go a straight course, you can't go a straight course.
Right.
You have to tack up and down to get to this upwards buoy.
Okay.
And that's one of the simplest lessons. So this is what I do. One of my greatest passions, and that sounds crazy, but I've done it over many, many years, and it seems so far off. And that's maybe one of the other messages. You can fulfill your dreams, even being a lawyer. My biggest passion is flying. So I have become a pilot.
Wow.
I did all my, my theoretical training. You could choose, right? You could choose flying on a plane and watching a movie and doing your work, which I do.
So you flew here you flew today?
No, no. I drove with the car now to Italy.
Okay. Oh, you drove. All right.
But I often fly. So, I took the time flying to learning theory for my pilot licenses.
Okay.
And flying is, to me, one of the biggest sources of, recreation and meditation. I exercise and I meditate.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. All those things, like that's yeah, I mean, like whatever you're doing is obviously, working for you. So we're going to wrap up soon, but I do want to ask you like one more thing that I'm really interested in. And of course I want to let you like talk about anything else you want to, but so tell me about teaching. Like you're really into, like, you teach at University of Chicago Law. Are you like a adjunct professor?
I'm an adjunct, not at Chicago. I'm an adjunct at Pepperdine University.
Pepperdine. Okay. Man, where's that? Like Malibu or?
It is Malibu. So
I don't know. Like I think you need to bring like the Lawyer Stories team out to Malibu at some point to talk to your students at Pepperdine. That's awesome. I mean, you seem.
Well, that's what I always, when I tell people I teach at Malibu, they're laughing because nobody knows that there's actually this great university out there.
How did you get connected with I'm not gonna say Malibu.
Let me do first some advertising for the school, and then I tell you the anecdote how that happened.
Okay.
So Pepperdine has one of the greatest worldwide programs for dispute resolution. They have the Strauss for dispute resolution. They have tailor-made master programs on dispute resolution, and it covers from litigation to all ADR. So it's the place for me to teach, apart from the fact that I love California and Malibu does not. And you should go out there and film because the campus is just mind-blowing. Whenever I get up in the morning, I'm like, this is a school?
Yeah.
Looks like to tell. And so how did this happen? So I've been teaching student seminars all over Europe.
Okay.
In Europe, there's many student organizations which by themselves organize trainings for the students. And one of them is called ELSA, European Law Student Association. And they always did a program on international arbitration. And I was always teaching international arbitration there. So one day, I think 3 years ago, I was giving a speech on price review arbitrations at an energy arbitration conference in Houston. And after my presentation, I had a coffee And all of a sudden, a young man approached me and said, "Oh, Mr. Willheim, I saw your speech, great speech, but I also, you may not remember, I was one of your students at ELSA." And I said, "This is great. What the hell are you doing here at this energy law conference?"
Right.
He said, "Well, actually, you know what? I'm an LLM student at Pepperdine University, and they somehow sent me there to this conference." And I said, "Oh, this is great. I actually will be in Los Angeles right after being here in Houston." And he said, "Really? For how long are you going to stay?" I said, "I don't know, maybe 10 days or so." And he said, "Can I ask you a question? Would you mind giving a guest lecture at Pepperdine while you're in Los Angeles?" I said, I would love doing that. 2 days later, one of the deans of the program, Tom Stepanovich, sent me an email and said, "You met this student of mine. He said that he would be prepared to give a lecture. Would you do this?" And I said, "I'd love to do it." So I gave the lecture. Right after the lecture, they asked me if I would teach the course on international commercial arbitration. And I said,
Wow.
"I'd love."
So how do you teach one course, but like where were you living? Like how do you go every week to?
So they have a summer program at Pepperdine, and so I do a 2-week intensive course.
Oh, that's amazing. So basically you go to Malibu for 2 weeks and okay.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. So you
From the
go and you
school,
teach for 2
I
weeks.
stay at the dorm.
Okay.
I stay at the dorm for 2 weeks, and I teach 4 days a week.
It's awesome.
And it's great because it's intensive work with the
Yep.
student, and we always end it with a moot court, with a moot arbitration, and they have great fun with this moot
Well,
arbitration.
I'm just kidding. Look, I took a week. I'm from the northeast of USA.
Yeah.
So like, in my law school, or actually when I was an undergrad, I took a 30-hour mediation training. You know what I mean? Like at UMass Amherst, and then I took another. So I get it. So like it's sort of a certain number of hours, and then I did the same thing in law school. I went to law school in Rhode Island. I did another mediation, but that's great that you have the opportunity to do those things.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, it reminded me of when I asked an old boss. There was a conference, or I think it was a training that I wanted to go to, and I said, "Hey, like this training, I should really go to this." She said, "Where is it?" I was like, "Oh, it's in Nevada," and she said, "Oh, Las Vegas. Yeah, it's in Vegas. You're not going." Like this was back, but. That's it sort of just like reminded me of that, but I think that's amazing.
See, the cool thing is my kids are both Americans.
Okay.
They're Americans. And so teaching at Pepperdine makes me a cool dad because they have teachers in Malibu. So
yeah. How old are they?
My daughter is 17 and my son is 13.
Oh, good ages. It's good age. Yeah. Cool. Great. So is there anything else that you want? I mean, I feel like I could talk to you and hang out for a while, but is there anything else you want to mention on the podcast? Before we
the only thing I want to mention to your audience is that I think that actually, our profession is changing so much. Like if you read, there's like authors. I don't know if you heard of Richard Susskind, who wrote books on the end of lawyers and stuff like that. This profession is definitely going through a transformation. And there's a number of factors, such as, the increased importance of legal tech. And many people, and it's older people like me or even older, who are afraid of this transition because they're afraid that they lose their purpose. But truth of the matter is that all these things make our profession so much more exciting. Because nobody of us went to law school to actually go through an extensive document review in your own little room.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with AI taking care of that and you focusing on what is really important. And I think the things we were sort of touching upon on the surface, such as there's more than only litigation or arbitration. There's so many ways of coming to a goal. Is that lawyers in the future will be much more than only process experts. We'll be more like consultants, combining many disciplines.
I actually remember that from your. I don't mean to cut you off. I remember that from your what I watched earlier, interdisciplinary and like conflict managers rather than attorneys being.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen in all the fields, and it makes the profession so much more exciting. Think of, you see it with the medical profession. You know, there's so much which helps with diagnosis, doctors today. That doesn't make the doctors redundant. It just changes your function and it changes your daily routine, but it changes it to something much better. You're not sort of in the grind, but you can focus on what you have really studied. So I think these are exciting times. We're now in challenging times with all the COVID. I'm not like your president who says this is just going to go away, but ultimately it will go away one way or the other.
Yep.
We don't know how long it will take, and we will pick up back a normal routine. And I think lawyers will play an important role, and it will be a time for all of us where we can really contribute to society in a very meaningful way. And I think it's something exciting. It's something lawyers of every generation can be proud of. This is not a boring profession. It's a great profession. It's an exciting profession. And, you know, people should just do it with passion and be open to what is out there.
I mean, I think you might be like the mentor of like all mentor for people who need to ask a question. Like, I think you might hit that personally. I think,
thank you.
You've said some great things, really. And I do want to mention that you were featured about a year ago on the Lawyer Stories feed. That's lawyer_stories on Instagram. Also on Facebook, Lawyer Stories. We now have the podcast, obviously. And we have a website, thelawyerstories.com, where we post our podcasts, and we do have a blog. And so you were featured July 1st, 2019. And that was, that was obviously a good time. So how can people get a hold of you, Johannes, if they want to ask you a question directly?
Well, the easiest is on my LinkedIn profile. Just Google my name or write it on the LinkedIn search function. Yep. Last name is Willheim. And on my Instagram. And I try to be as responsive as you are. I'm not sure if I can keep up with you because I know that you are super responsive.
Yeah. I look at the phone, it keeps me busy. So
great.
But so awesome to talk to you. I really appreciate it. I know it's late there and you traveled. How long was the drive today?
5 hours.
Wow. So I really appreciate it.
That was great. There's nothing better than going sailing. So you can drive 5 hours. You listen to music. It's all cool.
Yeah, that's good. So Johannes Willheim, everybody. Great time hanging out. Thanks again for being here.
Same here. I'm really happy to be on this show.
Yeah. We'll definitely do some more stuff on Instagram and, get you out there on Facebook. Maybe you could do a blog post if you have a blog. We can put that on our website. And, obviously we're going really hard with the podcast now, but I appreciate your time. Everybody hopefully they'll check you out on your YouTube. And wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves.
The Lawyer Stories podcast is produced by Marketing the Law. Are you looking at your social presence every day? Potential clients are. Learn how to magnetize your brand with the help of Marketing the Law. Find us on Instagram at Marketing the Law to learn more.